My opponent declares Rasputina, you're gonna see Papa coming right at you. Also, if they have a lot of shockwaves, I might even consider him as a screener unit in the same family as somebody like Frank. I've actually swapped out Papa Loco, puts Papa Loco into Francisco's position, which is horrifying on paper, but had really good success with it, depending on the situation.
It is time for another Malifaux deep dive, this time into the Guild Master Perdita and the family keyword. We go through a breakdown of what Perdita does well and where she can be the best pick in guild. My guests go through what they consider their core crews, and they're not the same. They cover second level play and things that you'll discover about the keyword that aren't apparent the first time you put them on the table. They also cover how to counter Perdita and the family crew. Stick around to the end because we talk about a little grind your gears segment about discussions we see happening sometimes online in forums and on a weird place that can be very frustrating and often not good for the game. Sit back and enjoy this deep dive into Perdita and the family. Enjoy.
Playing a tabletop strategy game allows you to unplug and test your skills against friends. Every week, Third Floor Wars delivers useful strategies, discussions, battle reports, and reviews to tabletop games like Malifaux. If you want to get better at the games you already play, or discover the games other people are playing, you are in the right place. Craig and Ray welcome you to the Third Floor and the Tabletop Talk broadcast.
Craig here on the third floor for yet another episode of Tabletop Talk. Now, today we're going to do a deep dive into the Malifaux Guild Master Perdita and how the family crew works in Malifaux 3rd Edition. My guests today are Carl Lee and Jesse Watson. Now, you likely know Carl as a prominent henchman out of the UK who's been doing some great work recently keeping Malifaux alive by having some online vassal tournaments. He was also previously a guest on the podcast where we had him come on and talk about what it's like to be a henchman and how to build a community. So, Carl, welcome back to the third floor.
Yeah, cheers for having me again, Craig. Obviously did an all right job the first time to get invited back for a second.
Well,
so.
That was 40 episodes ago, so don't don't let your head get too big, Carl. That's funny. It was a good episode, though. I'll have a link to it in the show notes. So, Carl, we're, about mid-September right now when we're recording, and you have got a bit of a big online competition happening. Can you tell me about it?
Yeah, for me, the next sort of event we're going to run is we're calling it the UK Super League. So pretty much getting the UK people together, over maybe something like 15, 20 rounds, depending on how many people, just vying for the top spot. Obviously, I helped out one of my locals a little bit with the Vassal World Cup as well. I did the kind of sweet talking weird to get some prizes for that, and I just helped out with a bit of the design work. But yeah, that's kind of my next big Vassal event, seeing as real life events just aren't a thing at the moment.
Yeah. So let's see. So this is going to be kind of what put together, figure out who the super friends are over in the UK.
So it's just a grueling, 20 week, 20 game, who comes out top at the end, standard sort of, X amount of points for winning. And then, league table at the end of the season. Hopefully, get the top players who we're used to playing and seeing on board. And then, maybe some people who are newer to Vassal who picked it up during lockdown, or, people who are actually not as often seen at real life tournaments who generally play Vassal. So just get a big mix of the UK guys and just, flip some cards and talk some smack.
Very cool. Now, Jesse is my other guest. He's a top player out of the Carolinas Conference. Very well known as one of the top guild players. You've seen him in the forums. You've seen him talk online about him. You've actually heard him here on the podcast. We had Jesse on just recently to do the Dashel deep dive. So, Jesse, welcome back to the third floor.
It's good to be back.
So when Jesse and I first came on before we hit the record button, I was joking. It feels like ages since I've seen Jesse, and he lives about like 4 doors down from me, literally here in North Carolina. But with he's been good about quarantining, and so have I, and we just don't see each other. Though typically, Jesse, you make it out to the camping trips, but you also seem to have weddings scheduled every time I try to schedule camping.
Yeah, just a few too many people's lives syncing up.
That's fun. So what have you been doing as far as trying to keep the knife sharp as far as playing Malifaux?
To be honest, I took kind of a step back when COVID hit for real. I'm one of those people whose jobs became a lot busier. And so I just couldn't keep up with the time commitment. And so I backed off, certainly on the social media side, but also in games. And I've been trying to get back in since. Still, big cheers to folks like Carl that are keeping the online game going and that community. It's been a pleasure, even looking in from the outside a bit, seeing that thriving in some ways and seeing some of the differences. You know, some of the people who used to play live that maybe are less of an entity right now, but other people who, you know, playing online is their primary method are now like rising up, and we're seeing some differences in opinions and some changes in play, and it's pretty cool to watch.
Well, I mean, one of the biggest features of the USFO Tour was to try to get cross-meta play. And if all of this Vassal stuff has done anything, we've seen some serious cross-meta play. I mean, instead of across the states, it's across the world. So, guys, what we're going to do today is we're going to focus on Perdita and the family crew. This is a pod I've been really looking forward to because my first Malifaux purchase way back when was family. Perdita was the first box I bought. It was the first models of Malifaux I painted. It was the first crew that handed me probably my first 10 losses. The good news is that she's much better in third than she is in two. But we're going to focus on how the family crew works in third edition. We're going to figure out how both Carl and Jesse build their core crews. What are some key tech pieces they bring in based off of the opponent, as well as the strategies and the schemes. And then, of course, we're going to find out how to counter the efficiencies of a family crew. So, Jesse, let's pretend someone listening right now has never played against Perdita, has never put Perdita on the table. Maybe the last time they even thought about Perdita was in second ed. What kind of master, what style of master is Perdita now?
Perdita now, and I think forever, and working backwards and working forwards, is a ranged threat aggressive master. And something I really enjoy when I bring the family to the table is that there is a sense of flavor, definitely, to the keyword. And it's the only keyword I play where I have like, you know, internal audio that kicks on when I activate certain models. You know, it's the spin of the cylinder on that 6-shooter for Dita when I activate her, because I know that I'm about to shoot some guys and it's going to hurt. And when she activates, she's typically going to remove at least one model from the table and be working down the chart through the enemy list as she goes.
So, Carl, she's definitely a ranged threat, right? And a damage dealing threat, but that's not all that she does, right? She threatens in other ways.
Yeah. So like Jesse said, you know, the 6-shooter kind of does load up when you activate it, but you know, there's other little bits as well that make the family quite interesting and Perdita quite interesting. There's clearly a theme between them that they're kind of like almost like a special force monster hunting unit. And that's pretty much shown with ep.118. So, you know, the family can let another family model take an action once the activation's ended, provided it's a lower cost. So it's almost kind of like a rank of seniority passing on, an order or an action to the next one. She helps as well, surprisingly, with card draw. It's just a bonus action that probably 9 times out of 10 never got used in second. But because she doesn't have trick shooting stapled to a card anymore, she actually uses it, and it ties in quite nicely with going elite with the monster hunter sort of theme. So the less models you have, or the difference in models, should I say, between the two crews adds to the card draw, which is nice. And then a couple of other abilities, she can ignore people's armor and shielded with analyze weakness. So again, she's helping out the family if you've got particularly troublesome armored model. And yeah, that kind of is the mainstay of her actions. And then also as well, which catches a few people out every now and again, is the ability to shoot scheme markers off from absolutely crazy distance, which is always tasty and nice.
Yeah, and that's something that we saw a little bit at the end of 2, right? When we had that gush of new upgrades that comes out. But that ability cannot be, you just can't talk about it enough. In a marker-heavy pool, her ability to remove markers at distance and have a threat range of removing markers that's just enormous is a big deal. Jesse, I'd be curious, though. We know, obviously, from an offensive place what she's doing and what she brings. I do want to get a better sense of what keeps her alive, though.
What keeps her alive is very much the same thing that makes the rest of her game function: offensive pressure.
Oh, okay.
There are toolboxes in there. She has, I think, a not often used, but can be put to great use, ability Finger on the Trigger that she can drop. For 1 AP, she throws up a 12-inch aura that if somebody ends a charge within it, she can shoot them. If she does enough damage, she cancels the attack at the end of the charge. So that's almost all of the defensive stuff that you get on the Master herself. And that speaks to a lot of the keyword that their defense is to shoot you.
Right.
Is to hit you hard. And as you go through the rest of the keyword, you're not going to find actually a whole lot of defensive abilities at all. You're going to find base stats and no real baked in healing. They function by reducing your opponent's options, applying that pressure, removing a couple of key scheme runners early on so that your opponent has to decide, do they want to focus on trying to kill your models, or do they actually want to have the AP left to complete their objectives?
So I'd be curious, Jesse, in your times running Perdita, how often does she see the end of turn 5?
If the game's going well, she'll usually ride it out to the end.
Yeah.
Now, where I'll usually lose it is whoever's protecting her. They'll get so frustrated with Francisco playing the lineman in front of her, or sometimes Papa Loco, that, a good half of her team might get dropped by a savvy opponent. But there's also a flip point that happens where your opponent realizes, it's turn 2, turn 3, they've lost a couple of models. They have to choose between going hard at killing your team or actually completing their objectives. Because sure, maybe you killed the rest of my team, but by that point, my AP efficiency, plus just having that advantage of some movement tricks, as well as deleting the occasional marker, has kept you from scoring most of your points. Do you actually want points, or do you just want to kill my models?
How close does that match up to your experience with her, Carl?
Pretty similar, to be honest. A good deal of games that have gone well, you'll see Perdita at the end, and she's pretty happy. But I think for me, where the games haven't gone well is when she's dropped early. You lose that threat power, the sheer killing potential. But yeah, sometimes you'll get to the end of turn 3. She's done her work. My opponent's put in a lot of AP to try and put her down, and actually at that point now, they're never gonna build up the victory points difference. So if she's gonna die, and you're still winning because you've done the legwork, then that happens quite a bit with me. I think one of the Vassal World Cup games, the last one before Team Scotland got knocked out, she tanked Nakima hard for 3 turns of the game and then finally died. But at that point, my opponent was he didn't have much of anything else left, and he didn't have the AP to get anything really. So it's she's died, but she's just been a pain, and she just took out enough models early on in the game to make it so he was never going to catch up. So. Right.
And that decision point that Jesse made, I think, is an important one. What were you going to say, Jesse?
Just to emphasize one thing that we're both referring to is AP. This keyword is competing over AP. Like that offensive power and everything, that is the threat, that is the pressure that you're putting on, but that pressure is there to reduce their AP. And your Apparel allows you to turn cards into AP. The other key ability they have is Bravado, bravado, which is when a family member concentrates, they also get a 4-inch push towards an enemy in line of sight, which means their focus is amazingly more efficient because it comes with a built-in move. Not to mention all the times that can trick around movement restrictions and other things going on. So they have a little bit of AP generation where they're turning cards into AP. They have some efficiency in their AP, and they're going to reduce yours. They're playing an AP competition game.
Right. And by eliminating your AP and then having efficiency on their side. The times that you've lost her, Jesse, were not situations where you just the game went against you. Is it a matter of overextending her or bad positioning or underestimating? So like if someone's listening and they're finding that they're losing Perdita on a regular basis, is there anything that we can offer them to say, look, you got to watch out for this?
Think like you've got a family.
Okay.
Perdita alone is not a great wrestler. She doesn't want to be mixed up in melee. She doesn't want to be brawling with people. Unless you put a lead line code on her, her only native defensive thing is a counter hit on getting shot.
Right.
So you've got to think about where you're putting her and realize you've got a 12-inch gun. Use that 12 inches. And if your opponent is going to come at her with a melee unit, that's when you really need to think, okay, so who's going to get her out of that bind? And you've got two models right off the top of my head that do a great job of it. Francisco and Santiago both have actions that are explicitly for getting a friendly out of melee combat.
Excellent. Well, guys, let's take a quick break. When we get back from this break, I want to talk more about the models that support her. So we're going to talk about both Carl and Jesse's core crew. We're going to learn a little bit more about the other family models. And we'll also talk a little bit about second masters and upgrades. We'll be right back.
Hi, I'm James Hahn, and I'm a patron of Third Floor Wars because I'm a henchman who loses most of his games, and the podcast has tons of valuable information to improve your play as well as what to expect from other crews. You can support them too. The link is in the show notes, or just search for Third Floor Wars on patreon.com.
What is it worth to you to get this podcast on a weekly basis? Is it worth $1 a month, $5 a month, $20 a month? If you'd like to help support the work that we're doing here on Third Floor Wars, please go by our Patreon. We're at patreon.com/Third Floor Wars. There you can pledge at any level, any dollar amount. Whatever you give us will help us put out quality content on a regular basis and hopefully make tabletop gaming a little bit better for you every week. Time to give a shout out to our newest patrons. A big special thanks goes to James Kahn, Rage Quit Wire, Deck Roll, Eloy, Robo Rotten, Jacob Suderman, Joshua Hatch, Donald Kroger, John Fox, and David Gadea. Because of you and the 100+ that are supporting us on Patreon, we're able to put out regular content on a weekly basis. We appreciate it. So I have found every time I do these deep dives that almost everybody I talk to has just the guaranteed core crew, the hires they're going to have. So if they make the decision, hey, I'm going to hire this keyword, it doesn't matter what the opponent's bringing. It doesn't matter what the pool is. They just know there's a handful, 1 or 2, or maybe even 3 models that will always make the crew. So for you, Carl, I'd be curious. Obviously you're bringing in Perdita because that's what we're talking about today. I do want to talk about the obvious core crew model, which is the totem. So can we talk a little bit about Perdita's totem? Yeah,
so thankfully the totem got a little bit of a buff in the editor, which it needed. So it then has the card draw at the end of its activation, which is nice in itself. But the main thing the totem does, aside from die pretty regularly, because it's pretty soft, but it's another avenue for, like Jesse said, AP efficiency. So it's got a bonus action to push a model away from it, and that can only be done on a friendly model. And also if you've got the tome, because I think it's only a 5 if I recall. So if you've got a 5 tome, then you get another focus. So and you'll probably see with how I start to build the crew as I continue talking about it, that stacking focus is my route, so to speak. And so you get the push, you get a focus, and realistically, you've used a 5 tome on your totem's bonus action. But what's also quite nifty with him, it's got a really low damage track and a trigger to increase the stat and put in the mask on its obey and take the action. So there's been a couple of times where, I'll terrorize a model, charge it, use a low mask, and obey my own model, especially with if you was to use a Dweller, which I'll go on to later, or Jesse will, you get a bonus to your stat for an out of activation attack if you choose to attack. Obviously, it's also another avenue to do something else, whether it's positioning. But for me, that's pretty much what the totem's doing. And because it's got black blood, it's staying away from all my other models so it doesn't bleed on them.
Yeah, it sounds, looking over the totem, obviously positioning is going to be a big deal just from the black blood alone, but also to try to keep him alive, because to your point, Carl, he seems pretty soft. So now you've got Perdita, now we've got the Enslaved Nephilim. What is literally your first hire? What is the number one core crew model for you?
People probably disagree, but I always take Frank. He's pretty much coming into every crew. He gets the App/L bonus from Perdita, and he usually is staying reasonably close. As Jesse mentioned, he's got the ability to help models get out of combat. Plus, as well, he's just got a monstrous, stat 7. And pretty much my mindset in 3rd edition is attacking with focus with high stats when I need to delete a model. And people will look and say, he's only 245, he's not min 3, he's not this, that, or the other. But, to me, he's min 4 because he's always hitting with focus. He's got 3 good triggers on his sword even, in the sense that, he's got family value, so you can get cards focus on other models. He's got crit strike, like all good guild henches, and he's got onslaught for more attacks. So you can comfortably, if you want to fund it, have 6 attacks out of Frank in a turn because, out of his activation, because we're not even including out of activation, because he's also got flurry. He's just a melee machine, but, he has a standard issue gun as well, so he can do a bit of range damage, and then keeping him alive. Finesse is a really good bonus action when he just wants to be in someone's face and they've got to waste AP getting around that negative. And then he's got his grit as well for when he gets to half health. He almost gets a pseudo armor essentially. Aside from that, his stat line's pretty generic for a guild hench. He's just pretty much making it into my crew every time, and every game he plays, he just does better and better.
Well, and I can see that. I mean, stat 7's no joke, right, on that melee weapon. And you kind of called it out, but I want to reinforce this. When you're dealing with a model that is going to have focus, right, and you see this, all throughout Malifaux, there are certain models and certain keywords where, focus is going to be either easy to acquire or an important part of the approach. You have to look at the entire ramping of the damage track. You can't look at just the min 3. You have to look at the fact that he's going 2, 4, then 5, and then at the upper end and middle end on the gun is also 2, 4, 5, and that's a big deal. The other thing I think that's interesting is there's no competition for that bonus action. You used to with an old Frank, it was kind of tough to figure out what he was going to do with that 0 action, but now it's just going to be obviously finesse, which I'm sure makes him a real pain. Jesse, what's your experience with Frank?
He's great. He is maybe 90% of the time. Not quite every time, but if he doesn't, then there's a very specific Frank-sized hole that's being filled with something else for some particular counterplay reason. He does wonderful things. 6 attacks a turn, 6 attacks in 1 activation is not at all unheard of. And people are going to say, well, where are you going to get the masks for that? It's worth the stones.
Right.
I start out these lists with a lot of stones, and by the end of turn 2 or 3, I'm a lot lower on stones, but it's worth it because you want to get that early advantage. And he can just, Wolverine berserker barrage away through a unit. And absolutely, you want at least that first hit to be using focus every time. He can't quite maintain, 6 focus for 6 attacks, but often enough you're going to be hitting for that. I also think of 4 as my true min. If I hit for 2 with family, I tend to feel bad.
Sure. Now, Carl, after Frank, who are you hiring?
Usually, I'm bringing in the Guild Steward.
Out of keyword, so going versatile.
Yeah, it's just a solid versatile model, but it plays into the building focus, and also helps with the fragile nature of a family as well. Because far more motivation, heal, and a focus is always good. 9 times out of 10, I'll do that first turn and always flip a severe for the heal flip on a model that's fully healed, which is frustrating but typical. And then he's also got a great trigger on Dispel Magic on a mask, on Galvanize. So again, you kind of getting a bit of work out of your low cards, because the Galvanize trigger will pulse a focus to another model. So there's been turns where the cards align, and between the Nephilim Slaves activation and the Guild Steward activation, a model could have 4 focus, or something quite grim like that, or it's split across 2 models, and just really setting up, as Jesse said, what I like to call the min 4, because of the focus.
Right. So I'd be curious. I mean, we're talking about the focus, and obviously this helps with it. But Carl, do you find family to be very card hungry?
Yes and no. So they are card hungry in the sense that betas or beta orientated models generally want your cards, because you want to guarantee that they hit, you want to guarantee that they do good damage. So in that sense, they are. But what also, because of the high stats, and generally, like I said, you're flipping on positives, there's a good chance that you're putting pressure on your opponent straight away, because you could flip a high moderate, or even one of your kind of lower severes, and the pressure's already on, and the realistic chance from your attack is you're doing it because you've got the card in hand anyway. So on that rare chance that you flip kind of 2 low cards, you've got the card to back it up. But just for me, it's the high stats and the focus combined, that if there's anything that eases a bit of hand pressure, it's kind of focusing down on those big stats.
That makes a ton of sense. Now, Jesse, if there's a single model of yours that I hate, it's the Guild Steward. Nova of 2019 is when I got to meet the Guild Steward, and was part of the reason that I ended my incredible run at Nova.
I told him.
I know it was completely my fault. You told me 10 times, and so listening's hard apparently. But I want to know: do you bring the Guild Steward into a family crew?
Sometimes.
Yeah.
It's not stapled. It's
not stapled. Okay.
I do sometimes bring him. Yeah.
So we know that you obviously bring Frank a lot. What's your next go-to model, Jesse?
I'm a Nino fan. And,
tell me about it.
Apparently that's a big point of argument. So here's the reason two reasons to bring a Nino. First off, he gets to drop after deployment, so you can put him where he's shooting things turn 1. And if your game is to put pressure on the opponent's high efficiency scheme running models early, Nino is going to be a good way to do that. Second, and what's really probably more important, long game, is he has the family values trigger baked in. Mm-hmm. And when he hits it, all he needs is line of sight. He doesn't have to be close. So a lot of the family works on 6-inch bubbles. Alporel's on a 6-inch bubble. Family values is on a 6-inch bubble, as well as key abilities on Frank, Santiago, and others. Nino just needs line of sight for his auras. And so he can, first activation, pop a scheme runner, just hit it, and then succeed with a 5 on a plus flip. Not hard to do. And then use his family values to give Dita an opportunity to focus, which she'll now push 4 inches up and have focus on her. At that point, I start playing him careful. And that's, I think, the biggest complaint is he's, 7 hit points with no defenses and often way, way overexposed in his initial deployment. And so, yeah, he goes down fast when the opponent gets to him. I rarely have Nino survive a game.
Right.
I usually get him to at least turn 3 or late turn 2.
And the way you do that, Jesse, is that you hit with him early and then just have him run away?
Yep.
Okay.
I want him alive for that mid game. I'm not trying to burn him out too early, because even if he's hanging out in the middle of your crew, just popping models a turn, he is an AP generator, and that's how you start stacking up that focus on your Francisco. It's how you start stacking up your focus on your Perdita, because it's harder, as you already mentioned with Apparel. You trade a card to make somebody of equal or lower cost take an action. So you can trade AP sideways and down, but it's harder to trade AP up.
Right.
And so the models that can do that, I think, are pretty clutch.
So I'd be curious, Carl, how about you? How often is Nino making your family crew?
Yeah, he's in the majority of crews. Very similar to Jesse, in the sense that he can, add focus up. He also can provide you the card draw. If you opt for that instead of the focus. He's also quite a good bait piece, because people love to go for him, because he is squishy, and he's the family member that gets reasonably bullied. So you can often use him as that piece that's going to draw something out, and you comfortably murder it. Plus, he's one of those models that just pretty much ignores everything with his gun. Cover concealment, which is great. He makes it most of the time. Again, he doesn't often survive, but usually when he's died, he's done his part for me anyway.
But that's also worth, that psychological game of Nino right there is already pretty valuable. He didn't survive. Well, that means they expended how much effort to go kill your mid-weight, mid-cost enforcer, as opposed to going after Francisco and Dita, who are really the members of your crew that are doing the most murder.
Right. So yeah, if Nino's pulling them away from Dita and Frank, then that's a good trade, is what you're saying, Jesse?
Yeah, basically he is a great bait piece, and people focus on him early. He's also a great pressure piece. If people know you have him, they're going to be a lot less likely to put up their low weight model in a position where it's going to be super efficient at running forward. Like, this model is going to be ready to hit the center line and drop a marker. Oh crap, they brought Nino.
Right.
Never mind. I'll slow my roll a turn with that model, and family loves that.
So Carl at this point has Frank and the Steward. You've got Frank and you've got Nino. Jesse, what's the next model that you're going to consider?
So a model that ends up in, my versatile pick for ending up in family quite a lot is the Pale Rider. Now, some people will say, well, obviously it's Guild. I'm not somebody who puts the Pale Rider in everything. In fact, these days I don't put the Pale Rider in all that much. But family, I definitely like him there. He helps get Dita or Frank, usually Dita, into position with his ride with me. And then he plays it safe. And I actually really like his first level, I always call them ultimates, but his first level pulse bonus action. Puts shielded and does healing on your units. And we've already established the family doesn't have defenses.
Right.
Frank and Papa Loco, their defenses trigger when they're at half life. They get a 1 damage reduction. So it's thinking of it like 0.5 armor, maybe. It's really what they have. But now imagine Frank at that level where he's under half health and he's got that 1 damage reduction, and he has shielded, and he just healed for a couple points. That can buy a whole nother turn for these models. And I already, that 6-inch pulse coming off of him, I already established, a lot of your family is going to be traveling within 6 to 10-ish inches of each other. He can usually hit most of my crew with that. And I find that really valuable.
And that's getting expensive, though. Frank's 9, Loco's 7. How much is the rider? He's 10, right?
He's 11.
Oh, he's 11. Yeah. So your core crew is getting pretty expensive. Carl, do you play with a Pale Rider as well?
Yeah, Pale Rider comes in quite a bit. Pretty much the same reason. Ride with me is just massive because Guild aren't the most mobile. Having an unimpeded option and the 7-inch move is great. again, Ruthless is something that isn't in abundance in family, particularly. And yeah, just getting his when he doesn't ride with me, getting that other bonus off is great for the little heal. If something's engaged, then the heal goes up slightly. His the one where all the models take the charge is also quite useful because you can get the bonus from Abuela if she's on the table. So yeah, he's a good pick. He comes in, and also if you've not really got the interest or you don't need his ultimate bonus to be used, you can drop a couple of rams and just injure someone, because then you're really driving home the stat difference. If you're stat 7 and someone's just got injured 2 on him, it could be really painful against someone's good henchman or one of their better models where you're just hitting them relentlessly pretty easily. Yeah.
Yep. Now, you've mentioned her a few times, Carl. I want to talk a little bit about Abuela. How often is Abuela making your crew?
So for me, I generally have kind of 2 main routes of crew, and one route is where Abuela comes in quite a lot, because I'll be really sort of channeling those out of activation actions. So, for example, Nino would be closer to the family because he's going to get Perdita's Apparel, he's going to get Frank's, and then he's going to be shooting at stat 6 on positives because of Abuela. And to be honest, she's a cheap model. There's nothing massively special about her except for the bonus for out of activation, but then also her bonus action itself is useful in the fact that it's an obey, and it benefits you targeting a family model. So it's another avenue for focus. It's another AP trade of a 5-stone model for potentially Frank at 9 or Nino at 7, and that's pretty much what she does. Every now and again, something will get close and she'll shotgun and wheel off, which is always quite funny. It always makes me laugh if she does some crazy damage, which she has done a few times. But more often than not, she just kind of mills around at the back, kind of like one of the small cogs that keeps the machine running. For me, anyway.
How about for you, Jesse? Does Abuela make your crews? I mean, she's cheap at 5.
Yeah, if I'm running keyword heavy and I'm not trying to tech for any particular reason, like sometimes you just need to tech a bit more, then Abuela is often one that I'll look for. In the same cost range as somebody might throw in an extra minion, I'll take her. And it's the same thing. She's running support in the back line. I will feel like I'm sort of puttering with that second AP is often what happens.
Right.
But her bonus, often 8, I can trade up to Frank for another AP, and he'll be swinging, he'll charge in on something and be stat 8. So yeah, it feels pretty good.
I bet it does.
So she's often hanging out like in the bushes or with some extra protection near, but not in the family. It's also worth noting, card expensive, but Apparel can trigger a bonus action.
Oh, okay.
So that bonus obey that she has means even a Nino, who normally would have to trade to a 7-cost model or down, can discard a card to go to Abuela. Abuela can then use her bonus to obey anybody short of Dita herself.
Nice.
Is it expensive? Yes. Should you do it every turn? No. But there will be some moments where that'll be an amazing switch play.
That'll be the play, right? Now, how about my buddy Santiago? He never, ever seemed to be good in 2. I love his alt model. It's one of my favorite alt models in all of Malifaux. Does he ever make the table, Jesse?
He makes the table.
Expensive.
He is. For me, he makes the table in basically 2 scenarios. One, the opponent's condition heavy.
Okay.
It's going to be somebody who's going to light everything on fire, things like that, because he brings sober up. So he's another focus generator, but it stops very quickly because, you slap focus on Perdita. She doesn't have any other conditions. You can't sober her up anymore because you'd be taking the first focus off. And the TN's not great on it either, unfortunately. But so he'll help with, if you need to be counter condition. I really like him when I need a ball carrier. So if it's in ley line, I think he's great because he's still useful while also having, because he's got Deadly Pursuit for 4-inch push, and a 5 walk. But with that Deadly Pursuit and Sober Up, he's still helping your line while carrying the ball pretty decently. 8 wounds, no defenses, and that's the biggest problem to him is you're paying 8 stones for something that's going to die to an ugly sneeze. But again, that mid line, but it really requires that your front line is doing its work.
Right. How about for you, Carl? How often does Santiago make it?
Rarely these days. I tried to give him the time, and I really want him to be good or better because the first time I looked at him in 3, I thought he looks like he's going to be useful. And then it's that model where you put it on the table and he looks like an easy bully victim for your opponent. And so I always kind of look at it, how will my opponent, or how would I target prioritize my own crew if I was playing against it? And Santiago is just often the weak link. And it might be that, you can, like Jesse said, he wants to play behind your forward runners, those aggressive pieces. But sometimes, or particularly the way I play my family usually, is I like one more person up there helping Frank and Perdita. I don't think Santiago's that far from being really workable. It just needs a few things. So his stats marry up with his grit ability, and then he fits thematically because he wants to be the person soaking up the damage, the bit of a tank, and then the one who goes crazy when his grit triggers and he just starts murdering things. But realistically, when his grit triggers, he's about to die. And every game where I've kind of used him, he always seemed to just go before he was about to get going, and about to be useful. And that could obviously partly be on the way I've played him, where I've maybe misjudged his impact that turn, but at the same time I've done that because he's needed to step up at that moment. And usually he just gets murdered.
So anybody... Oh, go ahead, Jesse.
No, just saying, that's why he does not make my standard list. I've got to have a particular reason to bring him. Same problems.
Anybody listening to this is going to wonder, are there minions in a family crew? Because we have not talked about a single family minion, but there's a couple of them in there. So Jesse, do the monster hunters, the pistoleros, do we ever bring a family minion into a family crew?
I like the monster hunters. Here's what you got. For guild, the monster hunters are really, really fast. They've got creep along and deadly pursuit, as well as a 5 move. They're going to travel the board really well. So if you're staying in family keyword and you need to go deep behind enemy lines, they're your way to go. Honestly, they're going to be your most reliable to get back there. The struggle is you're here and you're picking off scheme runners to try and make the AP efficiency go to your advantage. Well, here's the scheme runner that the enemy can easily pick off to make the AP go to their advantage, because they're 6 wounds and no real defenses. You've got to play careful with them, which is the same game that comes up with the pistoleros. 4 wounds, no defenses. Reckless means they can take a hit and get 3 AP. On paper, that's an amazing amount of AP out of a 4-stone significant model, but you've got to find a way to keep them alive. And so for both of these models, I really have to look at the board and go, do I have a path where these models are going to be advancing to a place where they're going to be useful without just getting picked off? That combined with a design in the family that already, in a number of ways, rewards playing elite. You're getting more AP out of your models with things like Aporel, and the higher cost the model, generally the more valuable that AP is. And so as you get smaller and smaller, you're trading for less valued AP, and you're running the higher risk of just being picked off, at which point I go, would those 4 stones be better put somewhere else?
So I'd be curious, Carl. I mean, do you drop scheme markers at all with the family crew? I mean, or do you just not bring family into it? Or, like, do you have scheme runners who run schemes, or do you not worry about that when you're running family?
So usually I'll avoid dropping as many scheme markers as possible. And we'll probably go into it more obviously when we go to the scheme breakdown. Like I find when I use family, I don't massively score highly. It's very much denying what they do. So, you'll whittle them down, you'll make their AP really strained. And like I said, if necessary, if the scheme dictates that I need to drop markers, then more often than not, it'll be the Pale Rider.
Got it.
Just because of how maneuverable he is.
Yep.
And as well, particularly the way I play, like I said, if the plan's gone well and the majority of their models that I've needed to kill to cripple them AP wise are gone, then at that point, any model can step up to drop the marker that's needed. I hopefully punch the way through their middle. Say if it was a sabotage, for example, and you need to get there, you punch the way through, and then you're quite safe there. Someone's tying up the threat, and whoever it needs to be is dropping those markers.
That makes a ton of sense. You know what I hadn't even thought about, but the Pale Rider solves the problem that Jesse talked about, which is, if you do need some scheme runners, why not use the Pale Rider because he'll survive, and Lord knows he can get to where you need him to get to. Now, Jesse, let's be honest. I could do an entire podcast on the greatness that is guild upgrades, but let's narrow it down a little bit. You are well documented as being somebody who is a little bit critical of the options that you have. Do you ever use upgrades with this crew?
Lead line coat.
Yeah,
typically. I mean, I've already established that I'm relying a lot on just a couple of models to do a ton of work.
Yep.
It's worth putting the lead light coat out on them for both the positioning and the armor, and that's going to be Dita and Frank. Sometimes that second coat drifts to somebody else. It depends on sort of my read of what the opponent's going to throw at me and things like that. What I'm guessing is going to happen. But this is one of those times that I'm going to bring the coat. Otherwise, not so much. There was some beautiful combo that used to exist with no prisoners and monster hunters. 2 monster hunters with no prisoners, chain obeying each other to run and gun all the way up the board. That doesn't exist anymore. And so the biggest gimmicks that you get out of things like no prisoners now refer to, first off, having a minion doing the action, which we've already established is less likely. And second involves putting somebody into melee, which we've already established is often not what we want.
Right.
So lead line coat, basically.
Carl, you the same as far as upgrades?
Yeah, pretty much lead line coat. 2 in every list most of the time. Sometimes you might drop, I forget what it's called because that's how much I use it. The one where you can ignore armor on a tome. Sometimes Nino might get
marksman
that.
Something.
Yeah, something like that. But again,
it's 2 stones.
It's 2 stones. I could just. Usually I'll use Perdita for analyze weakness on that rare opportunity where there's a model with the armor, analyze weakness, and then the whole crew can go to town on it. So yeah.
And that's actually something. Oh, I'm sorry, I cut you off.
No, it's okay. I was going to say I think maybe once or twice I can probably recall taking expert marksman, and yeah, I can't remember the last time I did. So
yeah. Expert Marksman is tempting because it relies on a tome to get that armor piercing, and Nino has a baked-in tome. So it's tempting, but I want to use that tome for family values. That's why he's here. He's not here to kill things with his 2, 3, 4 gun. Mm-hmm. But something I want to underscore from that, why not take that? Well, Perdita already has Analyze Weakness. And it's something I don't know that we quite got from our first walkthrough, but Dita has a really deep toolbox to work with. Of optional, not every game use abilities, but things like Analyze Weakness. I haven't used that in the last couple games, but then I ran her against Hoffman a little while back, and you can bet I used that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a toolbox that not every master gets. Some masters are much more like, I do one thing. It's all I ever do. And, or even, more bifurcated, like I can go left, I can go right. That's all I do.
Yeah.
Well, Perdita actually has a lot of flex in how you could play her. Most of the time, I'm still shooting things, but it's nice to know that I can switch how I'm going about it.
So I'd be curious, Jesse, with that versatility, does she become a potential hire? So do you find yourself running other keywords and maybe bringing in Perdita as a tech piece?
So in the metas where you can have Dita as a second master, which I think Carl has already established you don't do over there.
No, blanket ban in the UK.
So Carl and I chatted about this. Like, so Dita's second master, and we're both like, yeah, Nelly. I would also throw in Lucius. Because what she becomes at that point is an amazing 16 stone beater. And you will be able to juice her hand with both Nelly and Lucius.
Oh, right.
Also think about that Hero's Gamble where you're going to wash your hand out. You're going to discard whatever you have and get that many cards back. Okay, well, add that with Arcane Reservoir. It also gets boosted if you have fewer models than your opponent. Okay, well, if you're bringing a second master, that's going to be likely. So now you've got Dita shooting with a stat 7 gun, and she's going to have a better hand than her opponent every time. But there's also other little combinations that you can start to get. For instance, some of her secondary abilities become better when she's a second master than when she's the primary. So I already mentioned Finger on the Trigger. This is an ability that lots of Dita players just never use. And it can be used in a way that's a waste of time. Because if you spend 1 AP to throw up an aura that's counter charge, your opponents can choose not to charge. Or they can charge Dita and end up locking it down for every other model. There are ways around it. And so it's less valuable.
Mm-hmm.
But now imagine that in a Nelly list where Nelly has a trigger to make an opponent charge.
Oh, okay.
So Nelly's going to hit them for a bit of damage, force them to charge, and then Dita's going to shoot them. And since you're controlling the charge, you'll throw away that really low card to make sure you hit them as hard as you can. Also, in a Lucius list, he can bring in changelings. And so we've already talked about target practice being really good. But again, what always hurts me about target practice is using it on a master. That's a master AP. That is a clutch like once or twice when it's just exactly what you needed to cancel a scheme ability. Well, now, bring in a changeling that can use that ability.
Right.
You're trading a 4-stone model's AP to use that instead.
Very
also,
nice.
Again, Lucius is going to be able to move you around just fine and juice your hand.
Interesting. Very, very interesting. Well, guys, we're going to take another break. When we get back from this break, I want to talk about when we see the family hit the table. So we're going to talk about what are some of the ideal pools that make Perdita a candidate for the table. We'll also talk about some of the schemes that the family excels in. We'll be right back. Howdy, friends. Craig here. You deserve a new playmat. Here on the 3rd floor, we use Mats by Mars. They are scratch resistant, waterproof, wet erase marker compatible, almost free of glare, and lighter than neoprene. Mats by Mars gives you over 40 designs to choose from. You pick a mat, pick a design, and then you pick an overlay, like one for Marvel Crisis Protocol, Star Wars Legion, or even Malifaux 3rd Edition. Those overlays will really speed up your deployment and make the placement of objective markers so easy. Use our promotion code in the show notes to get a 10% discount on your first order. In the notes of your order, you can even request the 3rd floor logo on your mat for free. That makes the best mat in the business even a little better. So get some new mats, save yourself some money, and help support the show. Go to matsbymars.com. All the details are in the show notes, including the discount code. Guild has a bad reputation, justified or not, to be struggling, from on a power curve. But I got to tell you, as somebody who's played against Jesse and has seen some strong Guild play, Guild has good masters. Nelly is legit. Dashel, legit. Dashel may be one of the better masters in the game, period, especially since the errata. So I'd be curious for you, Carl, what are some of the strategies where, potentially Perdita is going to win out against the other Guild masters? When is there a particular strategy you think family does well in?
Yeah, she's workable into most of them. But if I was to really drill down, ones I particularly like her in, generally recover evidence is one I take her in quite a bit, because you know that most likely they're coming to you, because if they're a melee orientated crew, they've got to get there to kill your models and to drop the markers. What I also quite like about her in that is, depending on how you build the crew, you can make it so the 5 markers are on quite difficult models to get rid of. So, they are definitely on, where they are going to be, and your opponent is going to have hell to try and get them. And like I said, at that point, they're just having to come towards you, which plays really well into, obviously, Perdita just blasting whoever steps into a sight line, and then chaining off onto the others. So recover evidence is particularly one that I will generally drop her into. And a lot of people probably disagree with this, and it's actually Public Enemies, for a similar reason. And she will gain my pick over a different guildmaster in this, mostly depending on the schemes that accompany it. Because if there's schemes that, again, force your opponent towards me, and don't force me particularly to go to them, then you just the encounters providing a killing field where they have to just traipse across the board, getting peppered full of horrible stat 7 Perdita shots to be then met with Frank, Fiona, who I didn't mention, who pretty much makes the really high-end elite crews because of the durability. And at that point, they're just hitting, like I said, they've been hurt, and then they're hitting a brick wall of melee goodness. And those two particularly. But I'd definitely say she's got play in the majority of them.
Well, that gets to the toolbox nature that we've been talking about. How about for you, Jesse? When does Perdita win out and become the master you pick?
So she's one of my favorites for ley lines, because I really love to hunt ball carriers with her. That, popping the model on the backfield that they're depending to carry the ball throws off their efficiency so badly. First off, whoever just caught the ball now needs to get into position or throw the ball to somebody else, and their entire formation can often fall apart even in the first turn, just trying to sort that back out, which keeps them at range where it's fish in a barrel, where you're just going to keep shooting them. So I think that, plus they have enough movement tricks that they can, handle their own getting to where they need to be. Again, they don't need the AP to drop the marker. They just need to be in the right place for that strat. So I like it there. I also enjoy them for certain aspects of recover, definitely. The trick that really just makes it in my mind is, so you have somebody like Francisco engaged with an enemy target. Dita kills the target. They drop the marker under Francisco's feet.
Right.
You then op L to make Francisco pick it up. You don't have to get the exact model into that position, because often in recover evidence, there's an AP wasted just getting to where you need to be.
So I'd be curious for you, Jesse, with ley lines. There's no question I can see her as just as her. I mean, the whole crew is disruptive, right? Because you really ley lines. Most people walk into ley lines saying, here's my playbook. Here's how I'm going to get the ball from here to there, turn 1, turn 2, turn 3. And if you mess that up, then you're going to, and I know this firsthand because I happened to me on this live stream, everything crumbles at that point. What I'd be curious to know is, what's the playbook for family, though? How is family scoring ley lines? Who are you using to carry the ball? Or are you just taking, or is that 4-inch push enough?
So if I'm, keep it within the family themselves, again, Santiago's a decent backfield ball runner for getting those 3 in the back. That 4th, that's a late game maybe. The rider is another decent one, if need be, because he can, ride Dita up, and then if you don't want to leave him in the middle, which I wouldn't recommend, he can easily get back and tag the marker that he needs to tag. Though that somewhat limits his turn too. You could also use a monster hunter if the table's pretty full. Monster Hunters can get around just fine. And there are a number of other, sort of out of keyword options for that. But generally getting, at least the 3 points for that strat, not hard.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people, when they play ley lines, they're playing for 3 anyway. At least that's what the plan can be. How about schemes, Jesse? What are 1 or 2 schemes that really family loves?
Vendetta can be one of their best. The risk they run is on a Vendetta table. They also provide a lot of options. But if there's Vendetta in there, they find a midweight model or a henchman, something like that. They reduce it, and then at the end of your activation, you Operel into a friend to kill it.
Nice.
And so it's a nice, smooth, like, I've confirmed all of that. And then whoever was your Vendetta target for your team, you just, play them back, play them careful from then on out. And so basically, the fighty ones are going to be more to their advantage. Whereas I will say, if the scheme was more of a threat, they'd actually be somewhat threatened by Runic Binding.
Oh, okay.
Once. There's a chance you could catch them with it once, but then after that, I mean, really, that's on the Perdita player to just be paying attention. But because there's that tendency to have, a couple of clumps, that's what Runic Binding is designed to hit, is teams that are using bubbles. But really, you just need to have your eyes open and target practice away the markers if that's a problem.
How about for you, Carl? What are some schemes that you are just tickled to see if you're running family?
Similar to Jesse, Vendetta is a great one. Obviously, anything that benefits a crew that's going to deal damage, so let them bleed, is really easy to do, because you are just by virtue deleting models with this crew, provided you're playing it to its optimum. I quite like Leave Your Mark. Same reason as what I was saying before, just delete a couple of models where it becomes quite hard work for your opponent to have AP, punch through, so then they've got to chase those models that have now broken through, and then one model just rolls up, scores it turn 3, and then you can spend turn 4 setting it up for the end game, or even a turn later if you're really pushed. So that also similar approach for claim jump is something that I'll go for, and then take prisoner as well, because again, if you can kill enough where they don't have the models to be close to the take prisoner target. And again, I use Fiona quite a lot, so she can just bring them in once you've cleared stuff. And those are my kind of go-to sort of picks for Perdita.
That's interesting to me, because I wouldn't play some of those, but I'm also not bringing Fee. So that right there is sort of that difference in play styles. I rarely in any list, even actually almost never bring her in Nelly either. But I just don't bring Fiona much. I don't think and play that way. So when I look at things like Claim Jump, and even to a degree Leave Your Mark, I'm like, that requires me to be in one spot. Mm-hmm. And I'd rather take advantage of some of the mobility tricks that we have and the range advantage that we have, and not commit myself to a single location. If you're bringing Fee, though, well, that's a different mentality. I like it.
Carl, I'll be curious, though. So is Fiona coming in instead of Frank, or are you bringing Frank and Fiona?
Both.
Wow.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, a lot of the time, so probably in the last few games I've used Perdita. It's been Perdita, Frank with Leadline Coat, Fiona, often the Pale Rider.
Wow.
So it's really elite. And then, Guild Steward, and then, probably one more model at that point. That's if, like I said, the pool allows me to drop Nino and Abuela. Sometimes at a push, I'll drop my Soulstone Cache and have both of them in, and maybe drop like one of the the other cheap models. But it all very much depends on the pool. But Fiona for me is a really great pick, just because she's not fragile. She's got the inbuilt armor. She's got high defense, and there's also some really quite filthy plays with Bring It, and also her bonus action, which is quite possibly one of the most AP efficient actions in the game if you've got that low mask. But low masks are a bit of a battle in in the family crew at times.
I'm sure, yeah.
The number of times I've missed that ability, and it only needs a 2. You need a 2. And the number of times I've missed that ability is ridiculous.
Sorry, Craig. It was super clutch in one of the games I played where my opponent charged Nino and Fiona was kind of babysitting him. So she takes the hit, which placed her on the other side, obviously next to Nino, which put her in range of a scheme marker. So she got the positive to defense, well, to a duel, should I say. She comfortably just shrugged off the attack. Then she disengaged, pulled Nino out, shuffled him off towards a symbol, then charged back in and murdered the model. It's a super rare play, but it was one of those when it happened and, all the numbers aligned and I was like, this is going to work. It was just so nice.
That's funny. So, Jesse, I'd be curious. If I'm playing against family, right? So my opponent declares family, and I look at the scheme pool. Are there any schemes that I should just consider dead schemes? Are there any schemes I should definitely not take if I'm going up against Perdita?
I would be cautious of things like catch and release, because you're relying on a lightweight model to A, survive getting into position, and then B, survive any longer after that. And this is a team that's going to be able to hunt you down and kill you. We literally have monster hunters in the team to come and find you and kill you. And so, that would be a bit of a gamble. Off the top of my head, also, I would look at, even though I said leave your mark can be a difficult one for them to do, things that require you to put scheme markers in very precise locations. Again, they're going to be able to see what you're up to, target practice that marker away, and then put a Frank, or if you're bringing a Fiona, put a Fiona in that area, and then just laugh at you the next time you come to try.
Yeah, that makes sense. Carl, are there any schemes that you've had picked against your family crew that was a mistake?
Yeah, similar ones. Anything that wants to play in Perdita's threat bubble. That's just a no-no for your opponent. You pick that, and you may as well say I don't want to score that, because as soon as you get the sniff of it, like you said, you delete that marker, and then you put your horrible wall there of Fiona and Frank, or Frank and Santiago a few inches behind him, and just say, again, walk into this horrible hail of bullets.
And things your day will not end well.
It will end.
Right. So guys, let's take another break. When we get back from this break, we're going to get to my favorite segment, which is second level play, as well as weaknesses and counters. We'll be right back. There are so many online retailers. It can be hard to find one that is trustworthy, has great prices, along with some reliable customer service. On the third floor, we love ordering our gaming goodies from Gadzooks Gaming. Their selection of terrain, miniatures, dice, custom decor, and conversion bits are curated for gamers by gamers. You'll find they have what you need and what you didn't know you needed to take your gaming fun to the next level. If you mention Third Floor Wars in the cart notes of your order, you'll also get a free gift. And you'll help support the podcast. Check out gadzooksgaming.com and mention Third Floor Wars on checkout to get that free gift. So in the second level play segments, what I want to do is I want to find out from the guests, what did they uncover after getting several games in with the keyword? So there's some obvious things about family, obviously the movement efficiencies that we've talked about, the fact that they're shooty. But I'd be curious to know, Carl, after you got maybe your 10th game in or your 15th game in with Perdita, was there something else that you figured out or something that you had to master to really maximize the value?
Activation order. Is really key. If you're wanting to maximize your AP through app or L, through meaningful bonus actions, i.e. from Abuela, or, you know, if you've brought in another model that can give you those out of activation actions, you want your order of what models go in when to be spot on, so then the action is the most efficient possible. And I think a lot of people get caught up on, you know, big model, next big model, you know, and then they're trickling it down that way, whereas sometimes actually you don't want Perdita to go first because, like I said, you know, she needs to watch in case a marker gets dropped and she can just shoot it off. Or sometimes, you know, you don't want Frank to go just yet because you need them to extend a model so he can go in and tank it a little bit and be healed back up. So, you know, it might be that a different model's go in that is almost a throwaway action. And particularly with how I play, sometimes as well, Perdita doesn't want, or doesn't always want, should I say, the first activation, or the crew doesn't, because you want to see what, you know, you want your opponent to get into that position where you can meaningfully delete a model while using, you know, as minimum AP as possible. So yeah, you could win initiative and you know, activate, move, but then you've only got 2 shots. Whereas actually, you what comes from those games is your opponent you give that initiative over, and your opponent has to come to a certain area that you're going to be, you know, safely guarding and overwatching with guns. And at that point, you know, you delete the model, and then you've still got that AP. And yeah, those are the things that started to appear as I played more and more games.
So this brings to mind something I meant to ask about earlier. We're talking about a very elite crew. You mentioned letting other models activate. I would imagine you're getting a good bit of pass tokens every turn. Do you find yourself, Carl, using the pass tokens to actually pass activations with family, or to save up and you know, win initiative?
In terms of actual pass tokens, you will probably only get them turn 1, maybe turn 2, because if your game plan's going the right way, you will have removed the difference in models.
Okay.
So yeah, as an example, I played a real life game last week. Before,
Get out of here.
Yeah, before our area entered another lockdown. And in turn 1, I managed to delete 2 models with Perdita. And yeah, at that point, we evened model count. He went from 9 to 7, and I was on 7.
Wow.
So, you know, the pass tokens just didn't exist from turn 2. And then actually the reversed, and, you know, it just got more and more brutal. But yeah, if I generally don't pass in those early turns unless I'm 100% sure that by passing I will be able to kill a model.
How about for you, Jesse? What did you figure out about family once you got your reps in?
Resource management.
How so?
So this is one of those crews that has a use for every card in your hand, and you can run yourself right out. For instance, you just have to have certain rules of thumb. Like this card, in my mind, I've slated this card for an Opera, and I've slated this card for making something land. I've slated this card for that. You always want to hit moderate for your damage to be meaningful. Well, that means you need to have at least a moderate in your hand to confirm that. So very quickly it becomes, okay, so if you've got a severe, that's for confirming that things hit.
Right.
And then moderates become your damage. And I've seen some people is like, oh, well, I'm going to drop this 13 for damage. I'm like, that's usually not the right call. It's a difference of 1 point.
Yep.
Between moderate and severe. It's generally not the right call to go with. But it can be tough because you have a lot of resource exchange going on. When you're dropping a card for an Aporel, you also have family values where you have a choice. You know, do you draw a card or do you focus? And some people I've seen will sort of be on autopilot about that. But as I played it more, I started on autopilot. It was always focus. But as I played more, I'm like, you know, actually, I need to count and think ahead on where every card in my hand is going. And sometimes the card's the right choice instead. And so getting to that point where you're comfortable thinking about, and this relates to the positioning, it relates to also your activation order, thinking what your plan is for each model coming up and what resources they're going to need to use is going to be pretty important. Who gets your severes that turn? Things like that.
So I would be curious to know, Jesse, what is something someone can bring to the table or do on the table that's going to ruin your day as a Perdita player? So what is Perdita afraid of?
Hard to wound is so bloody annoying.
Oh, I could see that.
So I mean, here's the deal: we're trying to get to that even flip for damage so that we can cheat, and we're trying to win by suppressing fire. So if you can get to cover, you're making it hard on us. All right. So good positioning, good play, some model abilities will give you pretty regular cover, and we've only got one model that shoots through cover. If you can get to hard to wound as well, then you've got the worst part of cover as far as the family is concerned everywhere you go. Because we're going to be struggling to get to that even. And if we're not getting to even, we're hitting you for 2 damage.
Yep, that makes a ton of sense. How about for you, Carl? What are some good counter plays or counter tech that someone can bring in to make your life harder other than hard to wound?
Probably terror, actually.
Really?
Yeah, because terrifying is just a pain in the neck for a crew that is very rigid on resources. Like Jesse said, you will assign the cards in your hand specific roles on specific models. And even though, the majority of them have an above average willpower, it's just that additional flip where if you fail it, you're then having the decision to use your hand, or if you pass it with a high card, it steadily kills my soul when when you see that high card come up, because you automatically assign that was going to be on the attack, that made this card in my hand not get used, so the resource is just lessening.
Right.
So lots of terrifying card drain, anything like that, anything that is just making your resources ever so slightly thinner is just painful.
Well, and that lines up with what Jesse was saying as far as second level playing, resource management, and just how critical it is to manage your control hand. And if you have something like terrifying, putting pressure on that control hand, I could see that as being very frustrating. So Jesse, one model we haven't talked about yet is Papa Loco. One of my favorite models, just thematically and the look of it and everything. Does Papa ever make it back into family?
He does for me. He's a tech piece, especially for bringing in to blow it to hell. My opponent declares Rasputina, you're gonna see Papa coming right at you. Also, if they have a lot of shock waves, I might even consider him as a screener unit in the same family as somebody like Frank. I've actually swapped out Papa Loco, puts Papa Loco into Francisco's position, which is horrifying on paper, but had really good success with it, depending on the situation. He is actually the tankiest member of the family, because, again, you can Apparel into him and Juggernaut in a pinch. You can use the bonus action. You can also Apparel and blow it to hell. So, Rasputina's thrown up 8 pillars. Yeah. Papa Loco's activation plus, somebody else's Apparel, those pillars are gone, just all of them. And the reason I think he has value as a screener unit is once he's up in their team, as the 2 lines approach each other, they can't afford to let him get past you, because he's going to get into just surrounding your squishy models, and no matter what, he's really hard to stop. Without killing. And if you kill him, well, that's winning for him too.
Boom. So guys, we're going to take one more break. When we get back from this break, I want to talk to these gentlemen a little bit about what drives them nuts when they're online and having conversations about Malifaux. We'll be right back.
Howdy friends, Craig here. Nothing makes Malifaux easier than having the right tools. Here at the third floor, we love all the licensed Malifaux goodies from Custom Meeple. Not only are they helping support this podcast, they sell custom-made weird licensed tokens and terrain. They sell it all. Crew boxes, terrain, markers, tokens, and even a 3x3 full Malifaux board. Custom Meeple sells a complete M3E token set covering every marker and token you need to play. Custom Meeple are the source for the official accessories for Malifaux. Everything is designed by hand and authorized by Weird Games. Check them out at custommeeple.com, that's with one M, or follow the link in the show notes. Up your Malifaux game and be sure to tell them Craig from the third floor sent you. If you use the promo code Third Floor Friend, all one word, THIRD FLOORFRIEND, you'll get a 5% discount and help support the podcast. It's valid on everything except retail products and playmats.
So, part of what the lockdown has done is it's done good things. It's something we talked about at the very beginning, where we talk about the cross meta play. A lot of people are playing online. The world's gotten surprisingly a little bit smaller as far as the different metas playing each other and things like that. I know because of the local chat we have that there's certain hot takes and certain perspectives or certain angles about discussing Malifaux that can trigger different people. So I'd be curious to know, Carl, for you, if you see a conversation happening that has to deal with Malifaux or has to deal with tabletop gaming, is there a certain perspective, a certain conversation that really kind of grinds your gears?
I'm going to throw a curveball here. Can I have two?
Yes, you can have two.
There's two things that absolutely, really, really annoy me, drive me insane. So the first one is master tiers, and this is a huge topic, and people are obsessed with it in the sense that people have to assign a master a tier, and then you talk about S tier masters and then who's A tier and who's crap. And it's for me, there are a few masters that are, noticeably a bit worse. But at the same time, for me, it's kind of, do these masters have, what I like to call kind of scratch the surface? So do they just take more investment from a player to get the most out of it? So an example of this, and I was listening to the Patreon pod on Tuesday when Brian said he rated Reaver as probably his second pick in Rezzers. Well, the Rezzer chat will tell you that Reaver is awful, even after her buffs and even after being made slightly better. And to me, it sounds like Brian's done the work to put in the effort to get Reaver into a position where she is not only playable, but also working really well and getting results for him. So that's what bugs me with master tiers, because
I want to stay there for just a second, Carl. So I agree. That drives me nuts too. And for several reasons. One, and this is particular to Malifaux, I think it's hard to be definitive about master tiers in Malifaux because of the variable win conditions. The variable win conditions make a master great some days and terrible in other days. The other part is the divide in balance between all of the keywords and masters is so tight in Malifaux. It's one of the things I love about Malifaux. That it makes it a very difficult conversation as well. So I'm with you on that, Carl. How about you, Jesse? You made a face when Carl mentioned tiered masters.
Because I think he has seen me. He's seen my paragraph spiel on that. I think I actually remember him commenting on that once with a thumbs up, yeah, what the guy said. It frustrates me so much when people start that conversation. And part of the frustration is, so my background, educational psychologist, I think about how people think and how they learn and things like that. That conversation is a great learning conversation. give somebody a scenario and think about pros and cons and relative strengths of masters and what you would work with. Even if you don't have a perfect read on a master, that's a great learning space. And so to that extent, I'm happy to see those conversations happen. But I always shoot them down because of part 2. And part 2 is where somebody puts out a table and they're ranked from S to just throw it in the trash. And then there will be the people who look at that and make all of their decisions by it. Not only that, they'll make their decisions by it, and then they'll come on some forum and they'll tell somebody who's lesser experienced or whatever, yeah, don't bother with those 3 masters. They're on the bottom of the tier, even though that person themselves doesn't actually know.
Well, not only that, but how often is it that somebody who makes those tier lists has only played 3 of the 7 masters they tiered? Then you have the secondary mistake, which you just talked about, Jesse, is the guy who read it, who hasn't played any of them, and tells you, as a definitive thing, because some dipshit on Third Floor Wars said it, I know that this master's garbage because I heard it on Craig's stupid podcast. I completely agree. Now, Carl, you hinted that you had a second thing that grinds your gears. What is that?
So this, I guess it derives from the tiered masters bit, but it's, and you both have kind of touched on it. It's this this idea of something is bad, don't play it. Like this, whether it's a keyword or someone's specific list. And like I said, Malifaux is so fluid and it's so variable that someone might find something works in a specific encounter, against a specific opponent, in a specific meta with its own specific playstyle. Like already there's numerous variables. And like you said, certain gems within within Malifaux crew selection or gameplay can be lost because people are saying, don't touch X with a barge pole because I've decided it's crap because 10 guys said play Y. And, it might be that in a specific instance, that was the better master to play, or that keyword or this specific model could have been better. But you're looking at it with your perspective, from your meta, from the way you play. Like me and Jesse have, obviously built similarities in this Perdita crew, but also differences because we play, quite clearly a similar but slightly different game. So models get brought in that change it, but I'm not going to say Jesse's way is wrong and that he should only play my 7 model Perdita crew. And
it's good that you don't, because you'd be clearly wrong in saying
but yeah, so it really, like I said, it really bugs me when people don't look at the potential bigger picture. And also this kind of idea that, my opinion must be right because of X, Y, Z. And for me, for the overall kind of growth of Malifaux, you're just going to miss out on, like I said, people finding great combos, people finding interesting ways of playing masters, and also masters just not being used as much. Because you could say, I'm going to play this person, and someone goes, oh, why? When this one's better, like all the time. Yep. The only time that ever actually works is Colette, who's probably pound for pound best master in the game.
Well, she's an Arcanist. I mean, come on.
In blue.
Now, Jesse, being a friend in real life with you, one of the things that I know is that, and you mentioned it, you had to take a step back from social media. And I think part of that, if I understand correctly, was you being frustrated with some conversations happening on a weird place and things like that. So I really am anxious to hear for you, outside of what Carl's talked about, are there conversations that just frustrate you when you see them?
You can only throw the phone across the room so many times before you give your cat anxiety. So yeah, it can be tough when you get super frustrated, as I do, with the same sort of things that we've been talking about, of people just, what I think of as truly not thinking. They're not stopping to actually think about it. And so, yeah, I mean, I've had to, I do not go on a weird place. Sorry, we have tons of a weird place people on right now, and I know that's hosted by a lot of the people who are doing a lot of good work. I would rage quit on a daily basis. I can't do it. And so yeah, I have to be really careful in how much I go into those social spaces and who I have extended conversations with, because there are just norms of the internet where people just say things and they can't back them up. And when I try to engage with that and don't get a response back, that's super frustrating to me, because I am super nerding out about this game. I don't like to say that model is good, that model is bad. I like to say I like that model.
Right.
For this situation, or for this answer, I like that, but it looks like you like that. Okay, cool. And I definitely gravitate towards people who are having similar types of conversations, and shy away from these days those who don't. I just don't have time to be angry at people who are being dumb on the internet.
Yeah. Yep. I'm going to throw mine in real quick. And it's one that I've had for a long time. And actually, it's something that Cody Hyatt and I have in common. And it's gotten, my annoyance with this has gotten even worse now that I've done the Insider Insight series here on the podcast. So I've now had a chance to talk to, close to a dozen now different game designers from all over the world. And that is people who think they know how to design games, and people who think they know how to fix games. So this ties into what we're talking about. So what's the first part of the conversation is, this is garbage, right? Rev is garbage. And here's how you fix her. And what frustrates me about it is the level of authority that this is often presented with. And the other part is it cheapens the quality and difficulty of the work that's being done by the professionals. I've talked to both Matt and Kyle several times, both on the show and off the show. And people don't give them enough credit for the incredible amount of balance they brought to third edition. With what I think was really pretty darn good work in the first errata for this. Talking to Jamie Perkins over from Steamforged Games. And people just don't realize how difficult it is to design a game and to put it into play. And if you've listened to the Insider series, you've learned that balance is not the most important thing on their minds, because it's not the most important thing to make a game good and make a game enjoyable. But you talk to any competitive player and they'll tell you that that's the most important thing in game design, period, is balance. So, and Cody and I have had conversations about it as well. And I think what the term Cody uses is everybody puts their designer hat on and it doesn't fit anybody. So that's my version of that. Carl, it's good to have you back on the show, man. Always good to talk to you. And Jesse, at some point I'll see you in real life again. As soon as people start wearing masks, that'd be nice, so that we can get through the other side of this. So Jesse, any plugs or call outs before we wrap up?
Just to echo something I said earlier, thank you to everybody that is running an online league that is working to try and keep this game going. And what used to run in a live context is now trying to run almost entirely digitally. That's a lot of work, guys. And I am certainly not helping you in that because I have to step back, but I appreciate the folks that are putting in that work. So cheers to all the henches and hench substitutes who are doing the work out there. Preach. How about you, Carl?
Just I guess plug the Vassal Super League. It's coming up. It's on Facebook. It is only for the UK people. I'm sorry for people who wanted to to attend who aren't UK, but for the time frame I kind of want to run it on, and also for ease of arranging games, it's kind of going to be specific to us. I also just kind of want to shout out Vassal in general. People who know me will know that I've given it a ton of shit because I don't like it as much as Real Foe, and I am generally quite a sarcastic person in our chats, and I've given it a lot of grief because we call it like faux, it's fake foe.
Nice.
But there are people who are doing a lot of things to make sure that it's keeping people busy and that events are being run and that people are still getting their games in and new people are playing. I obviously, like I said, the UK league, but I also know that a couple of folks are trying to pull together to do a worldwide Masters event. I don't know the full details yet because they're still trying to hash it out, but I think that's like Dan Brown, Schemes and Stones Kyle, and a couple of others. And yeah, also obviously we've just had, or we're in the latter stages of the Vassal World Cup. So while it pains me to give Vassal so much praise, it is an avenue for people to play if you can't play in real life. And also I put a post up recently about it, but an appreciation to Weird for actually supporting the Vassal World Cup with prizes. He had no obligation to do that. It's not really to an extent making the money. It's probably a tough time for most mini companies.
Yep.
So yeah, if you didn't have to do that at all, and Weird Kelly was an absolute dream to just keep me up to date with what was going. And then just shout out to everyone playing, people making content, keeping us semi-sane in various states of lockdown. So
yeah, I'm going to back you up on that 100%, Carl. Both Dan and Steve have just done God's work when it comes to Vassal. And I'm much like you, probably worse than you, Carl. I don't enjoy playing on Vassal, but I am so glad it exists, and I'm glad that people are finding it enjoyable. I will be very interested to see if we do another World Cup type event. And whoever's organizing that, reach out to me. I've been having some conversations for another game about this type of thing, and there's some interesting ideas that I came across. So if you're interested in some one more cook in the kitchen, let me know, and I might be able to help with that. But and to Kelly at Weird, and really the whole crew over at Weird, everybody knows I'm a fanboy, but what they did to make Gen Con happen and the way that they helped us help them was incredible. And Kelly is one of the unsung heroes over there as far as the public is concerned. In the office, she's well sung. Everybody knows how great she is. But a lot of people outside of the Weird office don't realize that. And for those of you listening that made it all the way to the end, I appreciate it. Take care.
Be sure to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Twitch so you don't miss the avalanche of content we create. Links are in the show notes. Be sure to check out our shop on thirdfloorwars.com for the latest in gaming apparel and gear. There you'll also find the latest information for the USFO Tour. Find out where you rank in your conference or even in the entire United States. Get those models built, painted, and ready so we can see you at the next USFO Tour Masters event. Please take a moment to write a review of this pod on your favorite platform. Rating and reviewing helps us find more listeners almost as cool as you are. Be sure to share this feed with all of your friends who love tabletop gaming. Thanks for listening. Howdy folks, Craig here. Now if you love gadgets as much as we do, you're going to love the new Third Floor Wars Gadget Bundle from Schooner Labs. Branded with the logo of your favorite podcast, it comes with 2 measuring multi-tools, a compass stepper for those tight and important movements, along with a compact dashboard to track your turn, strat, and scheme scoring along with your soul stones and pass tokens. It is the perfect bundle for anyone who plays Malifaux or just wants to look cool while doing it. The link is in the show notes. Check them out and help support your favorite gaming podcast.
Yeah, I know the internet widely disagrees with me on Fiona. But
it's an odd one because I never want to rely on a specific model to be the linchpin of a crew. And she, like I said, she doesn't always make it, but in the kind of the pools that I prefer Perdita in, she's almost like a no-brainer because of that built-in durability. And yeah, I don't really understand the people who put, I do to an extent, but the additional lead line coat, or the additional armor on her. Sorry, if you put a lead line coat on her, so she's armor 2
on Fee. No,
because at that point you're dissuading them from ever attacking her, and that makes it more likely for them to attack the model you don't want them to attack, so Franco or Perdita. Whereas I would prefer Fiona to be the one who's getting attacked because she does have the hard to kill. She does have the higher defense, so she's naturally more resilient. So yeah, I don't want to ever turn them away from her as a valid target.
She's meant to be the punching bag.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like she's here to be the one you focus and waste your AP on, and I don't want to make it so hard to hit her or so hard to hit her meaningfully that they quit and then go after the soft targets.
Because that's it. If you see Fiona, defense 6, armor 2, then you just go, oh, I will hit Frank, and you're like, I really don't want you to go there.
Yeah.
All right, guys, I'll bring us back. Very good, gentlemen. Mm-hmm. All right, so Carl, for this, Jesse, you already know this. Pick one, maybe two strategies at the most. Mm-hmm. Keep in mind that she's not the only guild master, so we need to not know that she's good in something. We need to know she's the one to go to. And when is that? So when do you take Dita and not Lucius? When do you take Dita and not Nelly or not somebody else, Sonia? Same thing with the schemes. What are schemes that just make you go, you know what? I think I'm going to bring family to the table. Does that make sense?
Yep.
All right, cool. Very efficient for 15 minutes, gentlemen. Very nice. All right. Carl, I'll start with you. Mm-hmm. Let's talk about two models you always hire, okay?
Oof, tough. Yeah, that's cool.
All right.
I'll try not to pick the same two.
It's okay if they are.
I know there's one model that I'm going to give a shout out to, but I think he's going to pick it. So let's see.
Okay.
It's not the steward, is it?
It's not the what?
Not the steward.
No.
That's cool. Yeah, I was going to say Frank and the steward. So
cool. Good. Watson. Now, you likely know Carl as a prominent henchman out of the UK who's been doing some amazing work lately, keeping Malifaux alive by doing... Try that again.
We've left off a model, and the comment about willpower has made me think of it.
What's that?
Papa Loco.
Oh, let me edit it in. I'll tee up. Are you ready?
All right.
So, Jesse, one model we haven't talked about yet is Papa Loco. One of my favorite models, just thematically and the look of it and everything. Hey, are you still here? Look, the podcast is over. And you sat through all of the breaks and bloopers? Well, I mean, if you're here, might as well run over to patreon.com and become a supporter. Don't forget to rate and review this podcast too while you're at it, on whatever platform you're listening to. I do appreciate you sticking around. Take care.